Welcome back to The Practical Woodsman. I'm Rut, the creator and host of The Practical Woodsman. That's right. It's my genius which has brought this all into existence. Scientists and philosophers everywhere studying my noggin, trying to figure it out and harness its powers. What do berberine, cumin, fenugreek, turmeric, cinnamon, and honey all have in common? Have you ever wondered? Have you ever just been sitting around thinking, I wonder what turmeric and honey and cinnamon and cumin and all these things have in common? Well, they're overlooked items that you might want to have on hand for the end of the world. We're going to talk about their amazing properties and some other items that are overlooked that you might want to stock up on. Run down there to the Piggly Wiggly or to the Walmart, get stocked up on before the world ends. And we're going to all talk about all the reasons why. But before we get into that, we have to do the musical introduction to get us all in the mood. Winkety winkety. So don't go nowhere. I'll be right here when that ends.
Put a camp up right here.
Hey, if you're new to The Practical Woodsman, I want to invite you to join our online community over at thepracticalwoodsman.locals.com. Additionally, you can just download the locals.com app from the App Store and then search for The Practical Woodsman within. I do Saturday live streams when I'm able. Locals, by the way, is spelled Locals. We've got a nice group over there. Free speech platform. Can share and talk about whatever you want as long as it's legal. All right, let's get into this discussion about turmeric and cinnamon and all these overlooked things that maybe, when you're preparing for the end of the world, I say that comically. I'm just talking about like a collapse of society situation or a natural disaster type of situation, things like that, self-sufficiency situation. When we think about those sorts of things, often we think about what we need to stock up on, we probably think about, for example, freeze-dried food. I have a friend buys them in buckets, buys freeze-dried food in buckets. I'm not a big fan of them. I've talked about it I should say I am a fan of them. I'm not a fan of them as far as a true survival preparedness thing goes. And the reason for that is that they just don't offer very much flexibility. The meal comes as the meal comes. You pour in the hot water, that's what you get. So I much prefer for emergency or, end of the world scenarios, what I much prefer doing is stocking up on long shelf life, bulk dry goods items. Then you get all sorts of flexibility. I think about like the old wagon folks who were riding out west and here in the United States, what sorts of things would they take along with them? And the old frontiersmen, what sorts of things would they carry and keep? I even think about Dave Prinicky. If y'all don't know about Dave Prinicky, you want to look him up. His name's spelled Proenneke, Dave Prinicky. He went out, Alaska, built himself a log cabin with his own two hands, and he lived out there for over 30 years. No electricity or anything like that. And I look into a lot of like what were a lot of his supplies. A lot of his supplies were the things we're going to be talking about today. Anyway, not to get off the subject, but a lot of people think about stocking up on these freeze-dried meals. I think they're great for like backpacking. I don't think they're great for self-sufficiency if society were to collapse. Not a lot of flexibility in them. And if you just get a couple, well, not a couple, but if you get several base ingredients that have a really long shelf life, well, then the possibilities are endless. You can do all sorts of different things with them, and they'll stretch and last a long time. But on top of the food things, let's get back to this subject about turmeric, cumin, berberine, plain old honey, bees' honey, cinnamon, fenugreek. What do all these things have in common? The thing that all of these have in common is that they are naturally antimicrobial, meaning that they have antibacterial effects, they have antiviral effects, and they have antifungal properties and wound healing properties. This is on my mind because if y'all might remember in the previous, I think it was an exclusive video that I did, I've been dealing with an eye infection for the past 3 weeks. It's almost cleared up here, but you can still see it. It was a sty that got out of control, made me look ugly like Quasimodo. I mean, might have been an improvement, let's be honest. But it made me look like Disney's Quasimodo, and it was a pain in the butt. That's why I haven't been doing a lot of videos. I didn't want to be on video. I didn't want to see my face on video, and it was painful. And so I couldn't really think straight, to be honest with you. So I thought, I had access to prescribed eye drop antibiotics, and I actually had like a salve, an antibiotic salve for the eyeball. So I was fortunate in that way. What if society had collapsed? Pharmacies are all closed. Can't get to a doctor. What would I have done? So I started thinking about that. I started thinking, well, what I already got at home that would be good for those sorts of things. And I did a little bit of research. Now, some of these I already knew. Like I knew honey has those antimicrobial properties. And I knew cinnamon has antimicrobial properties. Now, I don't know about you. I don't want to go rubbing cinnamon in my eyeball anytime soon. And so that wasn't really an appealing option. But, there's a lot of things that you just don't think about in everyday life because of the conveniences of civilized modern day life. But it wouldn't take much for supply chains to break down. I mean, we all just come through this pandemic, right? We know how easily I couldn't get a bicycle, for example. My buddies all wanted to start riding bikes on these bike trails around here. He said, get a bike. I said, all right. This was like in 2020. During the height of the pandemic, could not get a bike. People had wiped out all the bicycles and new bikes weren't arriving. You take some things for granted until supply chains break down, and then you're just left with what you got. So when we're talking about things you might want to stock up on now, these really are some things that you might want to stock up on. I know I keep promising we're going to get into this talk about these herbs and spices and stuff, but the number one, let's just get it out of the way. I think the number one thing that people overlook and don't think about when they're preparing their basements or whatever for emergencies is something so simple, something we all take for granted. But I'll tell you what, if you can't get it, you will really be suffering. Can any of you guess what that number one thing is that I'm talking about? It's this: salt. You want to make sure that you've got lots of salt in storage, in your preparedness planning, because without salt, you will really be suffering. You need salt for everything. You can use salt to preserve meats and foods and lots of other things, for thousands of years. That's one of the big uses for salt, was to preserve food before refrigeration and all that. So you want to make sure that you got plenty of, more than I've got here. And this is, I think, 2 or 3 of those containers that you can get at the store, like those Morton salt containers you can get at the store. It's like 2 or 3 of those. So you want to have, I'd say 10, 12, 15 of these full of salt ready just in case society were to collapse. I'd say it's one of the number one things you want to have in stock. You can take bland food and turn it into something really appetizing with simply having salt. If you think about trying to make a stew or a soup or something just out of like wild edibles, that's not going to be enjoyable without salt. So salt is necessary for everything. A lot of these other items we're going to be talking about today, as far as flexibility goes, if you buy a freeze-dried, like backpacker's meal, or even a bucket of those meals, they've already got a lot of the sodium in them. But you can't take that sodium out of the meal and use it for other things. I mean, unless it comes with like a flavor packet or something like that. But you want to have granulated salt. If you take nothing else from this program, I'd say stock up on salt. Lots and lots of salt. Because if society folds, that's going to be one of the number one things you're going to want to be able to get a hold of. Preservation, and even medicinal properties. You know, you make saline solution out of this salt. It's good for treating wounds and stuff like that, cleaning wounds. A lot of sailors back in the old days, they would use seawater to clean wounds because the salt water, the saline water, has good properties in that way. All right, another basic thing that I think that everybody should have in stock, plenty of, let me get her, sugar. You want to make sure you got tons of sugar. It's another one of those things where if you don't have it, you'll be missing it. If you can't get any, buddy, you're going to be in dire straits. And I want to show you something here inside of my sugar container. Is a silica packet. When you order things from Amazon or you buy things at the store and you find these silica gel packets in the box, the purpose of those is to absorb excess moisture. Now, I've done some research on these silica gel packets, and an interesting thing about these silica gel packets, so I'm going to put that back in there with my sugar. But again, with the sugar, you're going to want, you know, pounds and pounds of sugar in stock, and you're going to want to keep that in a dry place so that it doesn't harden and all that. I put that silica gel in there just for that reason. But, you know, when you go to the store and you buy something that comes with these silica gel packets, save them. I save every one that comes to me. Here's something interesting about those silica gel packets. Once they've absorbed, so they're called silica gel, but they're not actually gel. They're like crystals. But the crystal has so many layers inside of it. It's said that if you take a single silica gel nodule and you were to unfold each one of its different parts, that you would get this enormous sheet that would be really impressive. But they're folded down into these little tiny crystals. And each one of those layers, which one of those sheets inside that crystal, grabs and retains moisture. Once the silica gel packet grabs all that moisture, it just holds on to it forever in a closed system. Now, if you leave your silica gel packets out of a closed system, then they'll absorb too much moisture. They'll reach their saturation point. But as long as they're in a closed system like this, they'll draw up the moisture will get drawn into them, and then they will just retain that forever. So if you'd like, and you got a bunch of different silica gel packets, once that's in there for a while, you can throw that one away and put a new one in there and get even more moisture out. But I would say, like, for example, this silica gel packet is completely saturated, but it's holding onto that moisture. It won't let it back into the container. So I can take that out, throw another one in there, and again, it's going to do the same thing. So I like to hang on to my silica gel packets. Sugar also, interesting point about sugar, is that it's also a preservant. When I was working out in Massachusetts as a Spanish interpreter for this hospital, I was working with this Russian interpreter, and she really liked raw salmon. And she would bring me this raw salmon. I'd say, how do you keep this salmon from going bad? And she would treat the salmon. So she would cut the salmon into thin slices. And then what she would do is she would make a mixture of salt and sugar. So many parts salt, so many parts sugar. And she would rub that into that salmon real good. And once she did that, she'd leave it in the refrigerator for a while, make sure that it was completely impregnated with that salt and sugar. And then she could just leave that salmon right out on the counter all night long, all day long, and it wouldn't go bad. So sugar, just like salt, is a great preservant. In addition to the fact that just a little, you know what hummingbirds run on, don't you? They run on just sugar water. They dip into these flowers, drink the sugar water out of the flower, and that allows them to really have a lot of energy, flap those wings like, it's hard for us to imagine. So if you think about end of the world scenario, keep your energy up, keep your spirits up, a little bit of sugar and water will provide you with energy. So it doesn't get much more simple than that. Make sure you got plenty of sugar, more than I've got here. Several buckets of this. You want it to last for a year or so. Okay, some other fundamental basics that get overlooked. You're going to want to have them at the end of the world, though. Cornmeal. Use cornmeal for lots of different things. You can take, for example, if you're cooking a stew or something like that, you can pour some cornmeal into the stew, into the broth, along with vegetables and whatever else you're throwing into the stew. And it provides calories and it provides body and thickness to the stew. There's a lot of other uses for cornmeal, but it'll last forever on your emergency counters, and you just want to have pounds and pounds of this cornmeal. I love cornmeal. That's one of those dry goods that just lasts forever and ever, and very versatile. It's talking about being flexible. I'm talking about being versatile. Another thing, regular flour. So these containers that I get, usually I get them, I'm buying some other product at the store, and then I save the container. I say this would be great for that. And so I reuse a lot of containers, as all of you who have been with me for any length of time already know. You're going to want that flour. You say, well, what about, I don't have electricity in my house. I don't have any fuel or anything like that. What good is the flour going to do me? I'm not going to be able to do any baking. Well, maybe what you need to do is invest in a Dutch oven. Oh, who's that manufacturer of cast iron skillets? Anyway, quality cast iron skillet. Quality cast iron Dutch oven, so you can continue to bake over an open fire. But let me tell you something about this flour and bread. So you can't go to the grocery store, can't go to the Piggly Wiggly, can't get bread no more. But you want a simple bread that is not too difficult to make. Flour and water. Flour, water, and of course, salt. That's all you need to make a simple bread, a simple cracker. You don't need any yeast. You don't need yeast. It'll come out like a cracker. But for a person who has gone several weeks without bread and the body's really craving bread, you can't beat that. A really simple way to make a simple bread. In fact, 2,000 years ago, that was called bread. They didn't call them crackers, they called them bread. You pour water into some flour, you knead that, you salt it, you flatten it out very thin, and then you take a fork and just poke some holes in the top of it. I've done this with acorn flour in the past. Maybe I can throw up a video of me doing that to give you an idea of exactly what we're talking about with this flour. But also, another thing with this flour, if you're making stews, stuff like that, you can pour the flour right into, just like I said with the cornmeal, into the stew, thicken up the soup into a stew, provide you more calories in each meal. And so there's just an endless number of things that you can do with this flour. Let's say you want to fry something. Before the modern day where you can just go to the grocery store like the Piggly Wiggly and you can buy a box of seasoned flour off the counter. When I was a boy at my house, we just did that with regular flour. So we'd take regular flour, put it in a cup or something. We'd season it the way we wanted it with salt and pepper and whatever else. And then that was our seasoned flour. So if you think about it in a self-sufficiency situation in the world, grocery stores are all shut down. If you got plenty of flour, then you can continue to fry things. And that brings us to oil. We'll make sure you've got plenty of oil in your storage for the collapse of civilization or whatever. You're going to want to cook with that oil. you're going to want to treat your knives with this oil. You can oil up your knives, your tools, those sorts of things, keep them from rusting. You can make a very simple candle out of any oil, as long as you've got some cotton. You'll be able to make a wick very simply. I've done that in the past. Maybe I'll show us a video of that. It's just oil in a container with your wick, and it'll burn for a long time. Of course, you'll want to cook with it. This oil right here would even power like an old oil lantern. Let me show you. Talking about like these old Furhan lanterns. The reason why people don't usually fuel their oil storm lanterns with cooking oil is because cooking oil is generally more expensive than just oil lamp oil. So it's a cost thing. But if you want versatility and flexibility in your preparedness, then stock up on a bunch of cooking oil. This is just vegetable oil here. This actually got gave to me. I have a neighbor. He's not my neighbor anymore. He used to be my neighbor, but we're still friends. He's an old-time mountain man, and he dumpster dives. And he gets all these things from the dumpsters and from they call them blessing boxes, like around the churches and stuff like that. And then when he comes and visits me, he says, I got a bunch of this extra stuff. Would you like it? And I say, yeah, sure. So I think he gave me this vegetable oil, and anytime he gives me something like this, I put it down in my emergency area where I keep my stuff. It's in my basement. And there, it'll last forever if I need it. To cook, to treat like your belt knives, to treat leather, treat dry skin, those sorts of things. Maybe put in your hair when you can't get shampoo and conditioner and stuff like that. It'd be good to have lots and lots of oil on hand. Talking about food grade oil. So olive oil, vegetable oil, coconut oil, all those. You want plenty of that in stock. Okay, my favorite things for ensuring that I'll always have something to eat. And no, it ain't the freeze-dried meals. Peas. Peas are an awesome long shelf item. Will last forever and ever and ever. These that I'm holding right here are years old, but I just set them down in a dry, cool place in my basement, and they last forever and ever and ever. You know, do you understand how many meals I can make out of just these peas? These are split peas, yellow and green, forever. And you know, I love these, so I eat these on a regular basis. It starts getting low, I fill them back up. So I watch the things on my shelves, and as they're getting low, I go to the Piggly Wiggly and I restock on these things. I try to keep a certain amount of all this stuff in stock. Rice. Look at the container that I got this rice in. Let me give you a pro tip. Go to the grocery store and get yourself a big container. This is plastic. Big plastic container of these pretzels. And then you eat all the pretzels, and then you've got this awesome rice container that you can keep down in your room or keep down in your basement. This is a 32 ounce, 2 pounds. So what I do, I have several of these. I keep them filled up with rice. And of course, rice will go forever and ever and ever. It will last on your shelf forever and ever and ever. And I'll tell you what made me think of rice as one of the most beautiful survival foods. When I was a kid, there was starvation going on in Africa. And you'd watch a TV show. And then at the end of the TV show, they'd ask you for a donation to help these starving kids in Africa. And then when I would look and see that they were feeding the kids, these relief trucks were pulling up and feeding these kids, you know what they were feeding them? Rice. Rice, because it goes a long way. There's so much rice out there in the world. Go to the grocery store. It's not that expensive. You can stock up on tons of rice. It'll last forever. It's one of the very best survival foods. Now, I'll tell you something interesting about rice. Regular white rice, which is what I stock up on because it's cheap, it's nutritious. Rice does not contain everything that the human body needs as far as protein goes and nutrients. And beans also do not contain everything that the human body needs as far as nutrients and protein goes. The most interesting thing, though, is that when you combine, see if I can get this, when you combine rice and beans, now you've got a combination that provides the body everything it needs. And just, it's so interesting to me that rice will last forever on a shelf. This rice here, again, a decade old. Decade old rice here still is good. I could eat it tonight, it'd be fine. Beans, same thing. Last forever on a shelf. As long as you keep them in a cool, dry place, they'll last forever on a shelf. And what I like to do is I like to buy all sorts of different beans and just mix them all together. I like the variety of lots of different beans. So any type of meal I'm making, I'm combining lots of these different types of beans. That's why in storage, I'm not real concerned about having them separated, like the black beans over here and these beans over here. I just combine them all, and that's how I keep them in my storage. So there you go. Here's another container that I've reused. Giant jar of pickles. I think, again, my old friend Rocky, the old neighbor, I think he come over and he said, "You want this jar of pickles?" I said, "Yeah." So I ate the pickles, and now it's one of the containers that I use to store emergency beans. If you have plenty of rice and beans, man, I'll tell you, you are set, along with your spices and along with some pasta. I don't have pasta here today, but I say the same thing for pasta. Store lots of pasta. It'll sit on a shelf for a long, long time. And don't overlook your cornmeal. Your cornmeal is going to come in handy for lots of different things. One last thing, it's kind of related to rice, that probably gets overlooked, is quinoa. Have you ever heard of quinoa? Get this quinoa grain. I really like grains, dry grains, rice, beans. These are the sorts of things that are going to sit on a shelf and last forever. This quinoa is even referenced in the Bible. The Egyptians were eating quinoa a cajillion years ago, and you can store that, and it goes a long, long way. The interesting thing about quinoa is it's actually not a grain, it's a seed, but it cooks like a grain. Very nutritious, talking about nutrient and calorie-rich foods here. All right, now let's get back to our earlier discussion about some of these medicinal issues that we want to talk about. The cinnamon, the cumin. Let's put these out here like this so you can all see them. The honey, turmeric, fenugreek. All right. Just don't want that in the way of anything. Okay. Let's talk about honey for a little bit. Honey has been valued for centuries because it tastes good, right? Well, not only because it tastes good, it's got remarkable medicinal properties. All of these do here. Well, except got the American ginseng hanging out there. I really do like American ginseng. It gives me energy, makes me feel young. Winkety winkety. But here's what you want to do. So I was thinking about that eye infection that I had for 2-3 weeks. What if society has collapsed and I can't get to a prescription antimicrobial or antiviral ointment or salve for my eyeball? What would I do? And what I realized is that I could take, for example, some berberine. Berberine has, and turmeric. Turmeric actually would be my number one choice. But both of these, all of these, have antimicrobial properties. So what I would do is I would take some of this turmeric that I have as in capsule form as a supplement. You can also buy it as a powder, I think, just as a spice powder. But let's do this on camera. I want to show you how I'd make a paste out of this. If I were in a dire situation, what I would do is I would take the turmeric capsules or the turmeric powder along with the honey, and I would make a paste. Let's go ahead and do that just so we get an idea of what that looks like. All right, so I just got a little container here just to show this off. And I got these turmeric capsules, and I'm going to break one of those open. And you can see, I hope, the powder, that turmeric powder. That's, I pulled out 2 capsules. I'm only going to need 1. So we'll put this other one back. Because remember, what I'm going to do, this is in our imaginary situation here, is I'm going to take the turmeric, make it into a paste for my eye infection. And turmeric has antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal properties. It's pretty potent, and it's because of this stuff in it that that's got in it. It's called curcumin. Curcumin is really the thing that makes it so potent. All right, and then we take some honey. I don't think this honey's been opened yet. There we go. Honey, by the way, they found in Egyptian tombs. It's 6,000 years old in Egyptian tombs, and they've been able to heat that up, and the honey's been just as good as the day it went into that tomb. So it's got a long shelf life. And honey, interestingly, is like a miracle thing. It's just like the turmeric. It's antimicrobial, antiviral. Antimicrobial means it's antiviral, antibacterial, and antifungal. So it's all those things, just like the turmeric is, which we're going to all mix together. Pour a little bit of honey in there to mix that into a paste. That's not bad. All right, so we've got our little paste there. And I'll tell you, don't take any medical advice from me, but I do want to say that the eye is very sensitive. So you probably don't want to shove that right into your eyeball, but maybe around the eye carefully. If you've got like I had, like a sty on the outside of the eye, right there. And so I would rub that gently, that paste there. I'd leave it there for a little bit and then wash that off. I'd repeat that. If, I couldn't get to a doctor, couldn't get behind the counter antibiotics and stuff like that. Powerful combination right here. Now, another thing you want to do is you want to take that turmeric as a supplement daily. Get that inside of you. And you want to take that supplement with berberine. And you want to take that supplement with fenugreek, because all 3 of these things have those antimicrobial properties. So you're ingesting it, it's doing its good inside of your body, but also you could use any of these things as a topical paste to spread on a wound. Cinnamon, likewise. Cinnamon is as powerful as turmeric, but I wouldn't want to get cinnamon anywhere near my eyeball. That's for daggum sure. But you could use cinnamon on any other wound, external wound. You could use it as an antibiotic on a wound, and that's another thing you could use it for, that paste. So if you cut your finger, cut your arm, you got feet problem, you could use all that. Spread the cinnamon inside your boots to fix fungal problems and stuff like that. Although some people's feet are also sensitive, so you might want to mix that with something else to dilute it a little bit. Maybe some of your cornmeal. Why would your cornmeal be a good mixture with your cinnamon? It'd be a good mixture because your cornmeal will absorb moisture, and the cinnamon will kill is antifungal, antimicrobial. So mix your cinnamon with your cornmeal, pour that in your boots, to help with fungal issues and sores and stuff like that on your feet. And while you're storing up cornmeal, another thing you might want to stock up on is cornstarch. You know, I've used this cornstarch in my boots. It absorbs moisture a lot. But either one, honestly, cornstarch or the cornmeal mixed with that cinnamon would be a really nice, like, antifungal boot solution. Did you know that honey contains hydrogen peroxide? You know, it's that same stuff that your mom used to buy when you were a kid, and she'd pour it on a wound and it would fizz up like soda pop. That's the hydrogen peroxide, and honey contains that. Got a low water content, high acidity, creates an inhospitable environment for bacteria. It's effective against pathogens like strep, E. coli, and others. Honey can inhibit viruses like the flu, like influenza, herpes. Honey can combat fungi, making it useful for skin or mucosal infections. Yeah, so yeah, mucosal would include the eyeballs. You know, they're sensitive, they're damp. Mucosal, I think, is the term for that. But anyway, if you wanted something to safely be able to put in your eye, honey would be one of those things. Honey is a natural wound and burn healer. Honey's ability to heal wounds and burns is one of its most celebrated properties. Reduces swelling and pain, draws moisture from the environment. You know why? Because of its high sugar content. Sugar is good for drawing moisture. In ancient Egypt, honey was applied to burns and wounds, a practice validated today by studies showing it outperforms some antiseptic creams for minor burns. Soothes coughs and sore throats. Of course, most of us already knew that. Sore throat relief. It boosts digestive health, has prebiotic effects, anti-ulcer properties, digestive soothing. It enhances skin and hair health as a moisturizer for the hair. Acne treatment. Can reduce acne because of its antimicrobial properties. Anti-aging. Protects skin. Hair conditioning. When mixed with oils, honey can nourish the scalp. Reduce dandruff. Improve hair shine. So, boy, I'll tell you what, I really went on about stocking up on all this salt, and I think it's one of the number ones. Honey's got to be the second one. And most of us, we've just got a simple little tub of honey in our kitchens. But man, I'll tell you what, it would be a great idea to have gallons of honey on stock for a true society collapse sort of situation. Honey supports immune health, antioxidants, trace nutrients, can provide some immunity during cold season. Has potential anti-cancer properties, energy and athletic performance. Remember, we were talking about the hummingbirds a little bit ago. Natural sugars. Honey's mix of glucose and fructose provides quick and sustainable energy, making it a favorite among athletes. In fact, for backpackers, I don't know if they're still selling them, but 20 years ago they were. You could just buy these little packs, and they're super expensive little packs. They're marketed as like ultra boost energy on the trail. So if you're backpacking out in the mountains, oh my gosh, you're trying to come up a mountain, you just pop one of those things out, and it's just honey. Just honey. You just slurp up the honey, and boom, it's like Popeye. You go marching up the mountain with renewed vigor. Electrolyte balance. Trace minerals in honey may help maintain hydration during exercise. All right, let's talk about cumin. Boy, I'll tell you what. That's one of my favorite spices right there is cumin. Cumin seeds contain bioactive compounds which contribute to their health benefits. They've been studied by traditional medicine and modern research. Good for digestion, stimulates digestion, has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effects, blood sugar regulation, antimicrobial properties. It says it has natural antibacterial and antifungal compounds effective against pathogens like E. coli and others. Weight management, respiratory health, iron source. It inhibits microbial growth, antioxidant protection. You can add cumin to meals like soups, stews, rice. Remember all that rice we got that we're going to be living off of for the next year because society has collapsed? You mix that, you season that with that cumin, and that supports digestion and overall health. You can make cumin into a tea. Did you know that? Boil 1 teaspoon of cumin seeds in 1 cup of water for 5 to 10 minutes. Strain and then drink, and that'll help you with your digestion. I think this is, I got this in this little vial here because I carry that into the backcountry as part of my spice kit. I'm going to try that, where I just take a little bit of this powder, mix it into a cup of hot water, and make a broth out of that, and sip on that. And I bet that's going to be amazing. In fact, why don't we do it now? Let me boil some water. See my electric kettle back there? We'll boil some water, and we'll do this right now while we're talking. You know, the way I think is that there's no sense in waiting until an emergency to try these things out for the first time. The best thing to do is to experiment with them at home, sort of like we're doing now. And so you get a feel for these things. You get a familiarity with them. And so, you know, you're not just shooting it off the cuff. When the time comes, you're already familiar with these things. Cumin is good as a preservative. Homemade pickles, chutneys, and marinades extends the shelf life of these things naturally. If you combine them with other things like turmeric in recipes, it gives it enhanced preservation. So as my water's boiling back there, you can see you might even be able to hear it. Let's talk about some of these other things like fenugreek. Fenugreek I take as a supplement daily, 3,000 milligrams. I take it once or twice a day. It has antibacterial compounds, flavonoids, alkaloids, prevents infection in minor wounds. Its anti-inflammatory properties can reduce swelling and pain. The mucilage in fenugreek seeds may also create a soothing protective layer. How would you make this into a paste? Well, the same way we did with that other one. These come in capsules. And so I would just pop open one of those capsules, and I would mix that with a dash of honey, and there you've got your paste. And it might be good for even an eye type of thing because it's not real pungent or spicy or, you know, that sort of thing. So it might be a good candidate for an eye infection. Let's say that I had that eye issue, society's down, I'm out in the woods or something like that. I want to make sure to clean that really good. Clean that really good with soap. Let that dry, and then apply my honey fenugreek paste there to my eye, and allow that to do its job. Turmeric, back to turmeric, is a fantastic home remedy, antimicrobial properties, but our water is boiled, so here's what we're going to do. We're just going to take some of this cumin, well, that smells good. Okay, and because this is just a test, I'm not going to make a whole cup of this tea. We're just going to make a little bit. Put some hot water in there. And because I can't imagine myself just drinking regular cumin, I'm going to add a little bit of salt in there. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. And we'll see how this turns out. A little bit of cumin tea for digestion and overall health. Medicine. Got these antimicrobial properties to it. It's awfully hot. Going to let that cool for a second. But going back to the turmeric. Turmeric is probably one of the best as far as like these antibacterial and antimicrobial properties go. And again, it's that curcumin that it's got in it. Curcumin has shown activity against bacteria like staph, E. coli, and others, which can help prevent infection in minor wounds. Antiviral properties. Turmeric exhibits antiviral effects against viruses like the flu, herpes, though evidence is stronger for its antibacterial properties. Anti-inflammatory effects. It reduces inflammation, which can minimize swelling and pain around a wound. This is another supplement I take daily. And it's interesting, I had stopped taking these things. I'd fallen off the wagon when I got this infection. Had the infection for a couple weeks. I was taking these behind-the-counter antibiotics for the eye, and it was kind of like maintaining it, but wasn't really making it get that much better. So then I said, what am I doing? I need to start taking my vitamins again. So I started taking, or the supplements. So I started taking the turmeric, the fenugreek, and the berberine, and that's when my eyes started clearing up. It's when I started taking these daily, along with the antibiotics that I was taking for the eye. That's when it really started clearing up. Studies suggest turmeric may accelerate wound closure by promoting collagen formation and tissue repair. Both fenugreek and turmeric have antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, and wound-soothing properties, making them suitable for minor wounds. Both are used traditionally as pastes for cuts, scrapes, or burns. So I'm not inventing anything here. It's just common sense. I'm not the first person to ever do it or try it or think about it. Turmeric, it says, between fenugreek and turmeric and all these things, has the most robust clinical research supporting its wound healing and antimicrobial effects compared to fenugreek. Then second would be like berberine. Berberine is more powerful than your fenugreek. So if you're just going to choose two, I'd say stock up on these two. And when I started taking these 3 daily, my eyes started to clear out. I did some warm compresses too on the eye. Let's see here. Salt. Salt's ability to cleanse and protect wounds is one of its most celebrated medicinal uses. Antibacterial action, wound irrigation, we talked about that a little bit. Saltwater rinses have been used for centuries to treat minor wounds or sores, especially in coastal communities. Here's a comparison of salt to honey, fenugreek, turmeric, and berberine. Unlike honey, fenugreek, turmeric, or berberine, which have direct antimicrobial compounds, salt's effect is primarily osmotic, dehydrating pathogens. However, it lacks the tissue regenerating properties of honey or turmeric. So how would you go about creating a saline solution with this table salt? All you do is you take a teaspoon of table salt or sea salt, 1 cup of boiled, cooled water to create a saline solution. And then you can rinse and clean wounds safely, but you want to have plenty of salt on hand for that. You know, we've talked about all of its virtues, not all of its virtues, but a lot of its virtues. Salt is good for oral health. I was dating a girl, I'm not really dating her. I had a crush on her back when I was like 19, 20. She was studying to be a lab scientist or something like that. Anyway, I'm sitting around with her one day and she says, I think I'm getting a sore throat. I said, what you need to do is you need to gargle salt water. So you pour a bunch of salt water into a cup, heat that up, and then you slowly gargle that whole cup of salt water. It's nasty, but you got to do it, I said. She says, do you know why that works? I said, no, I don't. She said, I've seen that under a microscope. As soon as the salt comes into contact with the microbes, the bacteria, and the viruses that cause sore throat, she said it immediately kills them. I've seen it under a microscope. Well, it was something we did all my life growing up. And so there you go. Science backs it up. Before we get into any more of this, let's try this cumin tea. That's what it looks like. Doesn't look too great. But remember, I put some salt in there too. Let's see what it's like. It doesn't taste great. It doesn't taste terrible though. I think a little bit of more salt in there. I want it to taste more like a broth than like just what it tastes like. Try again. Yeah. Yeah, it tastes like soup broth. That's really good. Be careful with the salt. I put in just a little bit too much salt. It's a little salty. I kind of got carried away there. But with just a little bit less salt there, I could drink that all night around a campfire or something like that. And it'd be good for the body. Okay, so there's something you can do. Cumin tea. It's actually more like a cumin broth. Yeah, so salt. Get sick, you're going to want to be able to gargle your salt water. It's good for your gums and reduces gum inflammation. Toothache relief. Rinsing with salt water can temporarily alleviate toothache pain because it reduces the bacterial load around the infected tooth. Nasal relief or respiratory relief. Nasal irrigation. Have you ever shot saline solution up your nose to clean your nose out? I have. Salt therapy. Inhaling salt particles inhaling salt particles in salt caves or through devices is believed to reduce inflammation and thin mucus in conditions like asthma and stuff like that. How about this? Here's another thing you might want to stock up on. When you were growing up, did your parents use a lot of Epsom salt? I know when I was doing those hot compresses on my eyes, I was doing it with that Epsom salt. So that's something that you might want to stock up on. Epsom salt is not like table salt. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. And so it's the magnesium that really is the magic in the Epsom salt. It has anti-inflammatory effects, good for baths, for magnesium absorption, stress reduction, skin health, electrolyte balance, and hydration. So back to just normal salt. You know, a lot of those electrolyte drinks that athletes and stuff are drinking, and backpackers and stuff like that, when you get to sweating a whole lot, you want to replace those salts. So again, for end of the world type of situation, you're going to want to make sure you got plenty of salt in stock. The stores are closed. You're not going to be able to go get it from the stores. Let's talk about all these things. So all these spices that we've talked about in context with salt and honey and all that stuff. So wound application, table salt. What's that best for? It's best for cleaning wounds with a saline rinse, but it doesn't promote healing like your honey does, or your turmeric, or your honey and your turmeric combined, which to me sounds like the power combo, and made into a paste. And that's what that paste looks like. Epsom salt, useful for soaking to reduce inflammation around wounds. Honey, it's superior for wound healing due to its antimicrobial, moisturizing, and tissue regenerating properties. Fenugreek offers antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory benefits, but less practical than honey or saline for wounds. Turmeric is another alternative to this fenugreek. It's more powerful, more potent, and that is all we're going to talk about today. So we've talked about today some things that people overlook. They think about the big things. They want tons of freeze-dried beef and tons of freeze-dried vegetables and stuff like that. Backpacking meals and those sorts of things. Not a lot of versatility in those things. What I prefer is like dry goods. I think about, again, people here in the United States, the frontiersmen and the people who went west in wagons. What sorts of things did they take that allowed them to be out and cut off from society for months at a time? And so it's those sorts of things that I really focus on, and that's part of my approach to things. But as far as like things you take for granted, salt, sugar, honey, cinnamon, cornmeal, these sorts of things are useful for many, many multiple types of situations, medicinal situations, dietary situations, and so you just can't beat them. If it's not something that you've given any thought to, well, stick around. We talk about these sorts of things an awful lot, as all of you who've been with me for a while can attest to. So I thank you for joining me for this episode of The Practical Woodsman, and I look forward to seeing you in the next show. Y'all hang in there, be good. I'll talk at you next time.